Hello, and welcome to another episode of Diverse Thinking, Different Learning. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wilson. Today, we're discussing the mental health toll of wildfires. Earlier this month, a massive wildfire swept through Los Angeles, leaving a profound mark on the city, its people, and all those connected to Southern California. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. The flames consumed homes, schools, businesses, neighborhoods. And for those who lived through the disaster, the emotional impact has been intense. Wildfires and other natural disasters are becoming more frequent and intense due to climate change, and their toll can take a heavy psychological toll. According to the American Psychological Association, environmental stressors like wildfires are a significant source of stress for over half of U.S. adults. And this was highlighted in their recent Stress in America survey. Now, to help us unpack this critical issue of the link between natural disasters and mental health, I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Jyoti Mishra, a leading expert in psychiatry and the Associate Director of the University of California Climate Change and Mental Health Council. Dr. Mishra has conducted groundbreaking research on the mental health impact of wildfires, including her work on the 2018 Camp Fire in Northern California. Her insights in both the immediate and long-term effects of wildfires are invaluable. Whether you've been personally affected by wildfires, know someone who has, or simply want to learn how to better support mental well-being during crises, this episode is packed with important takeaways. Let's dive in.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Dr. Mishra, thank you so much for joining me today.
Really glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I am thrilled. And, in the intro, I talked about what happened earlier this month in the LA area. It's absolutely devastating. And as I was watching everything unfold, I was thinking about the uncertainty of wildfires and the traumatic losses associated with them, and thinking that they are going to contribute significantly to mental health challenges. And then I read a CNN article that featured you talking about the mental health impact of wildfires. So I reached out to you, you responded quickly, and I'm so grateful. So thank you so much again for being here.
Of course. Yeah, I think mental health issues and impacts are something we don't highlight enough in the context of climate change, climate trauma, and a disaster such as this. And we need to talk about it to build awareness and also to have a path towards resilience. And I'm glad to talk to you about it.
Absolutely. And I'd love for you to kind of share your personal experience with wildfires. I know you've done some research. We'll talk about your study of the 2018 Camp Fire in Northern California. But what shaped your research and advocacy for mental health related to wildfires?
Yeah, I'm a mental health researcher, and I've been that since 2000, the year 2000, so quite a while now. And I study mental health, neuroscience, and that intersection of how our cognition and mental health is shaped in the brain, and all the factors that shape that, which is very much also the environment. We can't ignore the environment around us that shapes us, which includes obviously our immediate family, but also our community. And then the changes that are happening now, which is our changing climate, is really impacting our bodies as well as our brains. So just my natural studies of how the environment affects the brain led me to this work. But I can talk about, how I started the wildfire work. I knew a little bit that this would be impacting people. And it sort of started almost serendipitously. I wanted to do this work, and my son, when he was a first grader, came home with a flyer for a wildfire support. And the flyer had the support team from the Paradise area. Their contact was there, and I called them and we talked, and I knew there was a huge mental health burden emerging, but nobody really, studied it, quantified it, talked about it in a scientific way. And I thought that was our opportunity to be able to do this. And I'd also like to point out that, this kind of work is not one individual's. This is a community-led effort. It is with multiple community stakeholders in regions that are impacted, and everyone's voice is equal on the table. And we want to make sure that this science and the information that it yields and the work that it leads forward and the efforts towards, building back and resiliency are all a community-led effort that we do together. So this is a shout out to all of my partners who do this. This is not just me alone. Yeah.
Right. And you conducted research on the 2018 Camp Fire in Northern California. What did you learn from studying that fire?
Yeah, we, did research in 1,000 residents who were close to the fires, and we studied mental health impacts. And we were quite alarmed to find that there were very high rates and prevalence of symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and also depression. And the rates of these disorders were 2 to 3 times what is found in a population that is in a neighboring region of similar age, gender, socioeconomics, but that has not been impacted by wildfires such as this. And what was even more alarming was that the effects, the mental health impacts, can last a very long time, even up to a year after the disaster. People are suffering from these impacts. And this is not just my work, but others who have studied floods and earthquakes and other disasters. They've shown that mental health impacts can be very long lasting.
And I think that's such an important thing to talk about, because I received an email, everybody's been sending emails about the wildfire. And one of the headings was, with the wildfires behind us. And I thought, not so quick to move on, because this is continuing to have a significant toll on so many people. And what's interesting too is that people often think about the emotional toll of wildfires. You talked about depression, anxiety, and PTSD, which can be long lasting, but there's also a significant cognitive impact. I imagine that this can exacerbate attention issues, especially for individuals, kids with ADHD and other pre-existing challenges.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, cognitive challenges can be something that really comes up after such a fire or any other climate disaster. It's not unique to fires, but we've studied it in the context of the fires. We do see that individuals can be very distractible, and that means that you can't pay attention to the thing you want to focus on. You want to go about your normal routine. You want to continue with your day job and your family life, but everything is distracting. And my job as a neuroscientist was to really study how this was being interpreted by the brain. And what we found was that when people were trying to pay attention, actually the brain was processing every possible information that people were being presented with. Every possible information was being interpreted as relevant information. That means that, we give people a task to pay attention to. And in that task, there are things that you attend and things that are distractions that you don't attend. And the distractions are not tricks. They're just like simple things. Hey, attend to this object, this blue object, and don't attend to the red object. It's just very simple things like that. It's not a trick to find what is a distraction. But yet, we found that people who had been impacted by the wildfires had very hyper-aroused frontal brain systems. And that hyperarousal has previously been noted also in PTSD. Remember that PTSD came about as a consequence of what war veterans had experienced in in devastating wars. So what people are experiencing at a community level now is the same kind of trauma as a soldier would have experienced in a war situation. So imagining putting yourself in that, then actually we don't even have to imagine because our friends and family members are undergoing that, or have just underwent that very recently. So our brains go in this state of continuous hyperarousal that tends to signal that everything around me needs to be continuously scanned for threat. Anything around me in the environment could be threatening to my survival. And therefore, it's very hard for that brain to just pay attention to the thing that you need to. And again, we continue to see that even a year after the fires. We further find that also has further consequences on decision making and making decisions that are more farsighted as opposed to impulsive. That's hard to do. And, so these cognitive impacts are something to talk about, something to know, and something to also, exercise self-care about. In that it's okay that one will feel these symptoms, to be aware of them, and then to say, yes, my brain is in this state, what is now called the fire brain state, and I need to take care of myself, and I need to do as best as I can today, while my brain's not being so, supportive of me, and we will all recover together.
Right. And I can imagine that can be particularly difficult for parents who are trying to manage their fire brains and also their significant others, spouses, partners, and their children who also experience the same thing.
Absolutely. Children are very vulnerable. They're vulnerable to the smoke impacts. It's very important that, we have a good masking for our children because, actually the particulates can affect our breathing. And in the brain, the breathing centers have a very tight link to the cognitive centers, so that if breathing is actually disrupted and you're doing short breaths because you're feeling, you have shortness of breath because of the air around you, that can in itself trigger anxiety, because short breaths are not good for our cognitive systems that continuously need the blood pumping, the cardiorespiratory system to be, soundly working. And this really affects children the most. And so children can show signs of, like you said, high distractedness, irritability, impulsive behavior, so, acting out. And also they can have, that trauma can be so deep that they can have nightmares and dreams around what they have experienced or how their next day might be the same. And so, in front of our children, we need to find the best person we can be to, exercise the most cognitive control, which we may not have, but really try to get them to understand that we're all going to be okay through this. There's no better way than to, get our children into that state of, I am safe. I am well and I'm safe and I'm with my family, and this difficulty and this challenge is behind us. And as adults, role modeling that safety is very important.
Yes, because again, for all the reasons that you've been talking about, there's a destabilizing impact of wildfires for entire families, for entire communities, neighborhoods. And it seems that it's important for kids, as you're saying, to get back to certain routines, and that can help in the recovery efforts.
Absolutely. It's a tough balance because our families and friends in LA, of course, it's the best to be in a routine. It's best to also be with your community and your friends. And our children especially need that, to be in the normalcy of their friends and go back to, playing with the teens that they have. I saw that, personally last week when our family was here and making difficult choices, that the smoke is still in the air is bone dry, and the conditions are not conducive to be outside. But the kids, they want to go back because schools are trying to open again, trying to bring back a sense of routine and normalcy, and they want to see their friends, and they want to go back to what they did on a daily basis, and that's important as well. So there's this balance of protecting yourself, staying indoors, protecting yourself from the toxins that are around you, but then also for your mental well-being, that sense of community and being with your friends and family is very important.
And that community really helps with the recovery for all the reasons you just mentioned. And I think it's important to also talk about those people who weren't directly affected by the fires. You talked about the smoke and smoke exposure, which is linked to anxiety. And for those who may not have lost a home, they can also be impacted,
yes,
from a mental health standpoint because of exposure to the wildfire smoke.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that point. There's exposure to the wildfire smoke, but there's also the psychological trauma of seeing this unfold within the community that you love, seeing this impact your best friend's family, if not your family. This can lead to psychological impacts such as a survivor's guilt. It can also, per the research that we led, we showed that even those that we call indirectly impacted, that is, the fire happened in your community, you witnessed the fires, but you were not directly impacted by it. You did not lose home or property or had any kind of impacts on immediate family in any way. Those people also are showing symptoms greater than a population that is not impacted at all. Those people are also showing the cognitive impacts to a lesser grade than those that are directly impacted, but still at a significant level above a control group. And what all of that means to me, if I tell you the prevalence numbers, if you look at the mental health impacts that cross clinical thresholds for anxiety or depression or PTSD, almost 30 to 40% of the population in the impacted community, whether they're directly or indirectly exposed, are suffering from these symptoms or can develop these symptoms, which means that this is a community-wide trauma, which requires community-wide healing. It's not an person's job to deal with it on their own. It's really the time that we come out and support each other, our friends, our family, and everyone who has undergone this, and try to engage in activities that bring a sense of normalcy. My family was just involved in doing, my family that lives in LA was doing a fundraiser or helping with a fundraiser for another family of friends of theirs who lost their home tragically in the wildfires. And they were talking about how this family that was impacted was such a great part of the community. They had a community cafe and they, made the best truffles, and how we'd all thought about doing a pop-up in their cafe, but all of it does not exist anymore. But we were talking about, hey, what if we still did that pop-up? How, what if we still came together as friends and showed the community that this is all still possible, So I think it's obviously, it's not to be insensitive. It's not to be that, do the things that that everyone agrees to. We need to take care of everyone, be respectful of what people's needs are at this moment. And at the same time, be aware that we need to be there for our community, for our friends and family, and that a sense of normalcy in any way, or sense of routine that we can trigger within this environment that would do us good.
Yes. And it has been heartwarming to see the tremendous outreach, empathy, and giving from the community, the immediate community, surrounding community of people impacted, but also from around the world, frankly, just to see everyone coming together to help those in need. And that is a beautiful thing to see. And my hope is that it will persist beyond, the month after the devastation, because what I'm hearing from you and from the research is that a lot of this struggle, the mental health challenges, will persist and can persist up to a year after the fire, has subsided.
Yeah, what's important is that when we talk about these issues in the acute phase, in the phase that the fires just happened, people know about it and can seek out help, support, care as they need. And it's important that we support each other. And the more access to care that we receive in the acute phase, in the immediate aftermath, the better our long-term mental well-being will be. So, when you ask me to talk to you, it's better to talk to you now than 6 months after, when some of these issues may still persist. But, our brains are resilient and we can bounce back faster if we feel supported faster and in a way that we feel that once we become able, we can then support the community members that still feel impacted. The beauty with mental well-being is also that supporting each other is a huge way that we can support our own mental health instead of ruminating about the disaster that just impacted us, or ruminating about a friend in another city that is suffering from such a disaster. Figuring out cognitive ways, that is, actual steps one can take to help friends and family and community, can be a huge way in which we can flip our brains from being in that state of distress and emotion to a state of cognitive action. That's basically what most therapy does: change our thinking or framing from approaching an issue emotionally to approaching an issue cognitively. And that's basically what supporting each other also is. How can each of us think about one or more things that we can bring to each other? So, when we were talking to people who do disaster supports on a regular basis, who came out in 9/11 and so on. They'd said that, in these workshops that they were doing for providing mental health supports, they said the people were asked and requested about just their basic strengths. And people could have basic strengths like, hey, I just am a very good hugger. I give very good hugs. And if you're in a physical place like a church congregation or something like that, maybe you put up your hand and say, I'm a very good hugger and I can do this for you. So your personal strength does not have to be anything related to your expertise or anything like that. It's your personal empathy and compassion that you bring to others. And sharing that with others can be a huge sense of strength for your own mental well-being. And that brings about this really beautiful feedback loop of community healing that can be naturally sustained over a long period of time without needing so much effort. We just need to feel that sense of comfort and joy that comes from supporting our friends, family, neighbors, and so on.
Yes. And I really think it's important because I think, so many things that you said are resonating. When we see those images, we see the people who are directly impacted, who've lost their homes, who've lost everything. But then you also mentioned the survivor's guilt. There are people who've suffered invisible injuries. These are people whose homes may appear undamaged on the outside, but inside there's ash, there's smoke. In many cases, it can be uninhabitable. And those families are also dealing with a mix of relief that their home is alive and still standing, but then it's habitable, and then their neighbors have lost their home. So it's important to embrace and make sure that we're supporting all people impacted not only directly, but indirectly by these wildfires.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that was very important that was part of our work and has continued to really look at the impacts of indirect exposure that can be almost as much as direct exposure, especially when we talk about cognitive impacts, and acknowledging that survivor's guilt is real, and acknowledging that all of us need support right now. It's not just the people who lost their homes or the people who, didn't lose their homes. It's all together, everyone in the area that's affected by this disaster. We all need help.
Yes. And I love that you talk about kind of shifting our focus from what you described in the CNN piece, the doom and gloom, to a survive and thrive mindset. And it seems that having and fostering that collective healing and community healing and the communities providing support during these recovery efforts is essential to making that shift.
Yes, absolutely. This is really not the time to talk about apocalyptic events in a way that this is going to be our future. So, okay, it may be part of our future. So are many challenges in all of our lives. That's what makes life interesting. And in some ways, I know this is not just interesting, it's stressful, and it's displacement is not something any of us want to go through. And it's like, the saying goes that it's not exactly what happens to us, but what we make of what happens to us is important. And it's that same kind of logic that, yes, our actions in some ways, in terms of burning fossil fuels and so on, has brought us to this place. And a part of humanity is also trying to correct it. The part where we need to bend the curve for global warming, and we need to help ensure that these disasters happen less over time. We hope that part of humanity wins, and that hopefully is the case if everybody comes together and supports those causes for climate action. And so we can think about a future that is better, that will have less disasters. And therefore, the need of the hour really is to survive together and then thrive together. And I think that this community support and healing for each other can lead to thriving in a very beautiful way that isn't there. Actually, it's sad, but it's true that it takes for a very difficult event such as a disaster to really bring people together. At times when there are no disasters, the Surgeon General talked about the epidemic of loneliness, people being isolated, people not talking to each other, pleading that we should all have dinners together, pleading that we should not bring political conversations to the Thanksgiving table, and so on, right? But we're not, those issues just seem meaningless right now. Right now, in this situation, it just seems we just need to be there for each other, period. So the community is coming out and doing this for each other is a path towards thriving. And the more we talk about that positive, the more we bring that into the conversation, not just in our daily conversation, but also in the media, I think that can change the narrative. I personally, the more I talk about it, the more people who are doing such great work, who've done really amazing disaster relief, are coming to talk to me and then say, like, how can we help be part of the effort? And, people just, build beautiful things together when they hear about this, and they want to. And so I think the positive narrative needs to be emphasized more.
Yes, I completely agree. And with wildfires becoming more frequent due to climate change and other natural disasters, the mental health toll is only expected to grow. Are there things that we can do as a community, as a society, to prepare for the mental health challenges that accompany these events, to protect ourselves? Are there things that people impacted can be doing now? I know, obviously, seeking out mental health services, because we know that has a direct impact on outcomes, mental health outcomes. Are there other things that we can be doing?
Yeah, so being prepared for a future disaster, which is, in current California and the current times of climate change, that is of supreme importance, and making sure that our leaders, our elected leaders, our community leaders, they're all aware of that, and that they can help us make a plan together, and that it is a plan that is with joint stakeholders. It is not something that's put down on us. It's something that we can decide on together. That's very important. Of course, having access to mental health support is very important. The more acute support one can receive, the better the outcomes are in the long term. So post-disaster, immediately, what kind of supports you can have access to, or even noting those supports down, is important. And just overall, when we look at aspects of personal factors, so when we did this almost 1,000-person study after the campfire and try to look at, what personal factors are really driving well-being or protecting people's mental health, 30 to 40% of people were impacted, but then the rest 70% were not showing these symptoms. So what about those people that they're not impacted? It turns out that being physically fit, so having good exercise is really important. Having good sleep hygiene was really important. Being mindful was really important. So, mindfulness can really help us stay in the present moment and not really let prior traumas affect our present moment or seep into our futures. It's very difficult to not let a traumatic situation affect our futures, but the more mindfully we go through our days, the more we can be with our present selves, our breaths, or even the people that we're interacting with, the more present we are in that situation, the better the outcomes can be. And again, in that study, family support and a sense of community, people who felt that they had a greater sense of community with each other, they were mentally protected. So these are just, simple things that come from just things you can do, and have your elected officials be those who can come up with preparedness plans. And while that is ongoing, while you're exercising that voice, also think about how you can be physically and mentally fit for a future challenge such as this, and then come out stronger and be a support for the community around you.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought up mindfulness, because I always think about it, that is something that is very accessible. We talk about access and people trying to get into seeing therapists, but that is something that is easy to access and something that you can engage in exercises you can do now.
Absolutely. It's hard to start being mindful when you're just suffered. So it's hard to start when just after you've experienced trauma, and it's hard to say, I recommend you doing that, starting it off right now. Definitely get the care that you need. Seek out mental health supports, therapists, prescription meds, whatever you need, that needs to happen. And when you're feeling in a state of, I think I can start to take care of myself, then definitely consider mindfulness, consider self-compassion. Self-compassion is something actually we should practice on a daily basis. That is, acknowledging that we're going through a difficult time. I am going through a difficult time, and therefore, whatever I'm able to get done today to bring dinner out at the table, to be a calming voice to my child, even all of that is important. It does not have to be that I have to figure out how my house is going to be rebuilt, how it's all going to happen step by step. This is going to happen every day with small steps, but really pat yourself in the back for any task you're able to accomplish on a day-to-day basis. Again, your brain's in a state that's stressed, and it needs that sense of calm, that sense of safety, and that everything around is not a threat. And that's what we need to tell our brains. And So in that context, practicing mindfulness, self-compassion, and from that comes compassion towards others and the larger community. That whole practice overall is very important. And in the path towards resiliency, that practice is really important. But I acknowledge that it's hard to start just post-disaster. So take your time, or if you have such a practice, keep it ongoing as much as you can.
Dr. Mishra, I can't thank you enough for being here today. I mean, this conversation is timely. It's an important conversation. And I think you've really highlighted that the long-term impact of disasters like wildfires extend beyond physical destruction. They also have a lasting impact on mental health, but we can all play a role in the recovery of ourselves who are directly or indirectly impacted, and also our neighbors. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Karen, for bringing this message across. Really a great conversation.
Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation with Dr. Jyoti Mishra. Yesterday we celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and he said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. He believed that everyone has the ability to make a difference by helping others. And I want to reiterate that we can all do something, even something small, to help others rebuild, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally. If you or someone you know is struggling, resources like the Disaster Distress Helpline at 1-800-985-5990 is available. I have also put a link to mental health professionals in the Los Angeles area offering pro bono mental health services for those impacted by the wildfires. I hope you found this information helpful. And if you enjoyed the episode, found it helpful, please share it. Until next time, be well.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.